Hello and welcome back to the weekly career question with me, Amy Peterson from The Bridge Coaching. I am so grateful that you're here and I thank you for every minute of your time that you spend with me. I really appreciate it. I know you're very busy. So in these short videos, I share commonly asked career questions and some answers for you to think about. And most of these questions apply equally to you regardless what industry, country, or type of job you're in right now. And today's question is a great one that I've had quite a few times, which is about feedback. So let's dive in. So the question is, I don't get a lot of feedback in my job, and when I do, it's often negative or not very constructive. How do I manage this? This is a fantastic question, and I'll try to answer it as concisely as I can, but I've got 4 key things you've got to consider when it comes to feedback. Firstly, remember, even if it's delivered inappropriately, feedback by its very nature, constructive feedback, is there to help us grow. It's there to help us learn, and sometimes a negative experience can really teach us something about ourselves, about our boundaries, about what's okay for us. So remember that whatever your relationship is with feedback. I've spoken in previous videos about how my own journey to receiving and accepting and welcoming feedback was a really bumpy one because I found feedback more of a personal criticism. So I had to do a fair bit of work myself with my coach to be okay with receiving feedback and the fact that feedback was not a criticism of me as a person, but how the task or the role or the project could be improved. So if you're anything like me, just know that you're not alone, that feedback is a complicated word that you may not love right now, but I can assure you can become better friends with it. So a couple of things, if the previous question applies to you, is to go back to something neutral that is non-emotional, and in this case, revisit your role description. If you're getting negative feedback from people or not very constructive feedback from people about how you are doing your job or how you are behaving, make sure that you go back and look at that role description. Like, what is success for this role measured based upon? What are your KPIs or key performance indicators? How do you know that you are doing this job well? Now, if you're anything like a lot of the people I've worked with, their role descriptions have either not been very comprehensive, as in the detail wasn't really there. There was a lot of lofty overview words, but no clear performance indicators. Or they had moved up in the company and perhaps been promoted or moved across to another team, but they never received a new position description or job description. So it was just kind of assumed that they were going to know what they were working on. This is not uncommon, but what this highlights is that go back to that role description, and if you don't have a recent one, ask your manager, ask people in culture or HR, whatever they're called in your business, for an updated copy of your role description. And if it's not very comprehensive, this highlights a really clear opportunity for you to work with your manager or your leader to identify what success looks like. The other thing to, I guess, kind of avoid surprises around negative or not very constructive feedback is to plan for, if you already have performance reviews in place, or if you don't have performance reviews in your company, make sure that you ask for one. In most organizations in the corporate world, this happens every 6 months or 12 months, and it's usually around the time when they review salaries and at times increase salaries, but it depends very much on the country and the industry you're in. But performance reviews are basically a way for you to check in with your role and the focus areas of your role and how you are tracking against those, plus any additional goals, learning, or anything else that you and your manager is working on. My own experience from the corporate world has been very mixed, I will admit. Some organizations do this really well and some barely do it at all, or they had a format that was so not relevant for the daily running of a role that they didn't really make sense. But the thing about performance reviews is that if you don't have one already, there are templates and other things you can look for online, or say, Google key questions to ask in a performance review and things like that. And you can actually come with a suggestion, because it doesn't mean that if your company doesn't have a proper process around these things, it's probably not because they don't care. It could very well be that it simply wasn't a priority, or the organization isn't very mature, or they've changed a lot. So bring a suggestion. Go, look, I would really like for us to revisit this, and just so I'm really clear on what I'm tracked on and how that works, and make sure that that makes sense for my role. And very often, this can be a really helpful conversation. In addition to your official performance review, which is again that kind of objective review of your role and what you're meant to be doing or what you're meant to be measured on, I would really encourage you to seek constructive, and constructive is the keyword, feedback on a regular basis. So this can be from your manager, from your team members. If you are a manager, it could be from people reporting into you as well as your managers. It could be people that you have collaborated with on a project and things like that. And the thing here is to be a little bit mindful of how your organization works. If you have a very hierarchical organization where cross-team stuff isn't really quite as encouraged, I would perhaps, if I were you in that situation, I'd go to your manager first and say, hey, as we discussed in my performance review, I really want to get better at X, Y, and Z, or I really want to seek feedback from the teams that I work with and how I can improve my day-to-day work. And so you can go and sense check and say, I wanted to send out a quick email to person X, Y, and Z. Would that be okay with you? I'm just really looking to grow and improve and be more effective in my work. I'd be very, very surprised if your manager came back and said, no, that's not appropriate. But it is always good to sense check if you're not sure. Also remember that seeking feedback under this third point is not necessarily like a formal process with a long Word document that they've got to fill in and complete and send back to you. It could be just a discussion. It could be, you know, I'm really keen, we've worked really closely on this project together and I'm really keen to learn and grow and things that I could have done better. Would it be okay if I scheduled a 10-minute coffee chat with you and we can just chat about your thoughts and areas that I can improve on? So it doesn't have to be super formal, but I will say whether you do it via email or phone, make sure you reach out beforehand and give them time to prepare before you're expecting to get the feedback back, because most people don't really want to deliver feedback on the spot. It's nicer and more considered and way more constructive if they have a moment to think about it and come back to you, whether that's in writing or over a coffee. And finally, you might look at this all and go, well, it sounds like I've got to do a whole lot of work, Emmy, to get that feedback that I want or to have a more constructive environment. And yes, you actually do. It depends a lot on the culture and the values in the company that you work for. It can be very, very different in different organizations. But the final thing I would say is become a giver of constructive and supportive feedback to other people. And this can be to your manager, it could be to your team members, it could be to anyone you come across. It doesn't even have to be people in your workplace. You know, thank someone who provided you with a good service. Become that person that is positive yet constructive. If someone did a great job on 2 out of 5 things, give them suitable praise for the 2 things they did well, and give them a specific example, a constructive example. For example, I really liked how you ran the project. Your energy in the calls was really beautiful. One thing I found challenging sometimes was that you gave me really short timelines to come back and deliver my parts of the project. Next time it would be great if I could have a little bit more of a heads up on the elements you need from me so we can deliver better work together. It's really positive, really constructive, and it also touches on both the tasks that the person did and their behavior and their general energy, because we've got to get away from this society where we're only measuring people on what they do, but rather how they do it. If someone's positive, supportive, and kind, we're a lot more able to have certain conversations. So that's my really top line answer. I could talk about this all day, as you can probably tell. Maybe we'll expand this in a future question. But as always, feel free to send in any questions you have to hello@thebridgecoaching.com.au. I would love to answer your question either there via email or maybe even in a future video. All the best and have an amazing day until we chat again.